My name is Dr. Katja Lasch. I'm heading the German Center for Research and Innovation based in Delhi, and I welcome you all to our web talk today, which is on implications of COVID-19 on research and development in ventilators. I think an up-to-date topic. We just had a short discussion on the situation in Germany and in India, and I think it's an up-to-date topic we are dealing with today. The web talk is part of a web talk series which the German Center for Research and Innovation is organizing. We had yesterday a web talk on geriatric care and the implications of COVID-19, and today we are having the web talk on ventilators. I want to mention that this web talk is organized with the RWTH Aachen, which is one of our supporter organizations of the German Center for Research and Innovation. Let me briefly introduce our organization, as you might not be very firm what we are doing. We are an umbrella organization of 18 research institutions based in India. It's German research institutions. We connected and we work together to give a connector to the German landscape, to present the German research landscape in India, but also to connect scientists and researchers and to give a point of departure for future projects. We are financed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Germany, and the coordination is done here in Delhi by the German Academic Exchange Service. So the scope of today's talk is to get a feeling what's ongoing in ventilators research, especially in people's ventilators, as the project is called at the RWTH Aachen, and ventilators which are on a lower scale and which are newly developed in times of a pandemic. To discuss today, to connect. So how we go to follow this event, we're going to have two short presentations, and I welcome my panelists here on the panel. Welcome Professor Leonhardt, who is connected from Germany from the RWTH Aachen. Welcome and warm greetings to Aachen, and we send you over a bit of warm weather too. Today it's 40 degrees here, so warm greetings from Delhi to Aachen. We also welcome Akash Murthy, and we had a plan of change in the last minute. Akash Murthy is an embedded developer at the Biodesign Innovation Lab. Welcome also, I think you connected from south of India to us, and we're glad that you could join on this last minute announcement. You all are aware that we are living in time of pandemics. We are more than a year now in the COVID-19 pandemic, and there's a lot of news in the news, but also in research articles on the implications on the healthcare system, and that the healthcare systems are under a certain load at the moment, and there is a crisis in the healthcare system, and not just in the emerging and developing countries, also in the industrial countries. So healthcare systems are reaching their edges, and I think the topic we deal today is affordable and robust health equipment, which is nevertheless offering good services for patients, is a very up-to-date topic. The pandemic has accelerated developments in research and innovation on different levels. We all are aware of the vaccinations, be it also in technical devices, and that's the topic of today. Be it from starting off the scratch with a new device, and that's what we're going to hear from Professor Leonhardt, or be it about upscaling its own businesses and developing its own businesses further. That's the story behind the startup we have today with us. Projects on ventilators and on robust and affordable ventilators are run worldwide. So there is a project in the Stanford University, but also at IIT Rocky, and I'm very looking forward to learn what are the difficulties in this project, what are the challenges, and how one can overcome these challenges. So let me introduce our panel. So we have Professor Stefan Leonhardt, who has a background in control engineering, but also holds an MD from the University of Frankfurt. And that makes him, of course, a perfect specialist for medical technologies. After almost 5 years as research and development manager for a German company, he joined the RWTH Aachen in 2013 as a full professor in biomedical engineering, where he has been the Phillips and Dow Chair of Medical Information Technology till 2017. His research interests include closed loop control and automation in medicine, bioimpedance, and other things. He is a fellow of the North Rhine-Westphalian Academy of Sciences, Humanities and Arts, and he served as the president for the International Society for Bioelectromagnetism. And I think in this Indian context, very important to know is that he has a strong connection to India, to the IIT Madras especially, and he's one of the few German professors who is appointed as a distinguished professor at IIT Madras in Chennai, India. So welcome again, Professor Leonhard, to this panel. Our second speaker is Akash Murthy, who is an embedded developer. He is working with Biodesign Innovation Labs. Biodesign Innovation Labs is a medical device and healthcare company based in Bangalore. And the company is supported by one of the large funding schemes in India, the DWIH scheme. That's the scheme from the Department of Biotechnology, but also is supported by the government of Karnataka. The company was founded by Indians with international experience who worked in the MIT lab. Gautam Pasupuletti is one of the CEOs who was supposed to be here but could not make it. But nevertheless, they brought technology back to India and have been working several years on developing affordable medical devices and are into developing also on new devices at the moment. And one of the devices is a ventilator. We will kick off the event with 2 short presentations. Then I will ask the panelists a couple of questions. And then the floor is free for your questions. We are a small group today, but I think that gives us a lot of opportunity for interactive questions. So we want to have it quite interactively. That's why I asked the panelists to have a rather short presentation, and I would request Professor Leonhard maybe to open our session with a short introduction on the project People's Ventilator. So the floor is you, and we are really looking forward to your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Alash. So good afternoon from India. Good afternoon, India. I'm sorry, from Germany. It's a pleasure to be here and share some of our insights and experiences over the last year. And I hope that you can now see my screen. Does that work properly? I think it does. So yeah, I want to introduce the PB1000 project as requested. Personal background has already been said. I indeed worked in industry for about 5 years, but I also have some experience with ventilator development, which I should mention also from that industrial part of my career. Now, as a brief introduction, we all are aware what's going on with the virus. Virus is a virus that attaches to the body on the pneumatic side. The lung is susceptible to this virus, also is the pharynx with ACE2 receptors distributed strongly in the cells in these tissues. And in severe cases, we get pneumonia. And of course, ventilators are a method to give patients with pneumonia time, to buy them time actually. It's not curing the disease, but it's buying time. And it is important to have special devices to do so properly. Now, patients with pneumonia, with COVID-19 pneumonia, come with an ARDS that is a little different from what we see normally. ARDS means adult respiratory distress syndrome coming out of pneumonia. In addition to atelectases, which are these white areas at the back of the patient, we have these ground glass opacities that we don't see all the time in other pneumonias, which come from microthrombi and edema produced in the lung. And this virus goes to other tissues as well, to the kidney and also to the nervous tissue. The brain is affected as well. So it's really a multivirus if it hits your heart. Now, letality is high in elderlies, which affects Germany or other countries with an aging population strongly. Also, other countries, of course, have that, but in Germany especially, and in Japan, I think in other countries, we have a lot of people aged above 80, and they were suffering very strongly before being vaccinated. So that these large numbers of lethality are a big problem, or have been a big problem in the last year in Germany. If you compare the lethality or the mortality to one of the older pandemics, the Spanish influenza, many of us remember this, at least those with a medical background. This has been taught to me as a medical student very strongly. Mortality was 1.5 to 3%, with bacterial superinfections a little higher, 6%. So we had 25 million casualties at the time. Around that. These are estimates, of course, rough estimates, but maybe this number 25 million and 500 million infections should stay in our mind, because if we look at SARS, the lethality that we have now for COVID-19 is 2.2%. In many countries a little higher, in some other countries as India a little less than that, but it is in the range of that Spanish influenza. And we are now at 130 million infections worldwide, with almost 3 million casualties. So that we should keep in mind. Now, when we started our enterprise, the question was, did we have enough ventilators? And all of a sudden, March last year, everybody was aware how many ventilators Germany had, and other countries too, which even I did not really pay attention to before. So the ICU beds and the ventilators, 28,000 in Germany ICU beds initially, and 20,000 ventilators, ICU ventilators in Germany were ramped up very soon, within a month, to 40 and 30,000 respectively. And that results in about 37 ICU ventilators per 100,000 citizens. This is high in Europe compared to other countries. So this is a good number, a good starting point if you want, but we have European countries with almost only a tenth of that. And I will show you in a minute, if you look to other countries on other continents, it's even less. In March, politicians urged everybody to build ventilators. So there has been Mr. Trump enforced the American companies, the automotive companies, to build ventilators. We had similar newspaper articles. This is in Germany. In German, I apologize. Should we build ventilators using the production capacity of large manufacturers? So there was a lot of activity, a lot of pressure in the last year. Now, you may ask, well, what came out of this? The established manufacturers were asked to produce additional ventilators. For example, Philips got an order of 30,000 ventilators, out of which 12,000 additional ventilators were shipped before the contract was stopped. Similarly, in Germany, we had about an order of 10,000, but 1,600 were finally taken before the contract was then stopped, because the necessity at the time was not high enough anymore. So maybe we had enough ventilators in Germany and we never reached capacity limits in Germany. However, other countries, this is Brazil at the moment, with a temporary hospital in a large fair hall, has a lot of scarcity of oxygen and ventilators. Numbers have been going up very dramatically, and there are relatives of patients standing in line to fill up their oxygen bottles. So it's not just ventilators, we also have to look for oxygen and other logistics. There have been some ventilator donations recently. If you look at other countries, this is Africa as an example, the numbers are even lower. They are 2 or 3 orders of magnitude lower in many countries. So we do have a need worldwide for ventilators. I don't think there is any doubt about this. Now, if you start such an enterprise like a pandemic ventilator, you have to follow regulation and standards. After all, medical industry, medical device industry is regulated market, and there are standards like the European standard EN ISO 80601-212, which regulates especially conditions and requirements for ICU ventilators, and that's if you have these substandards and attached standards, altogether is about 600 requirements, so quite a high number. If you do this and analyze this in detail, it boils down to a lot of monitoring requirements, oxygen especially, flow of gas, and pressure. And it also requires alarming. A lot of them are really required, pressure supply, low blockage, leakage, and so on. And security methods, and also redundancy with respect to a failed operation mode. Yet, due to scarcity of devices, the British authorities in March 2020 released a document for pandemic emergency approval where some of these, not all, but some of these requirements were released to some extent, and still, even those requirements enforced high performance operation. I think that is important to keep in mind. That's all. There are other documents which I skip due to time constraints, but similar documents came from the World Health Organizations, from the Americans, and so on. Now, I should briefly introduce the PB1000 project and what it started with Bergamo, actually. When we've had the first news from Italy on the newspapers, on the televisions, and also by email contacts, the situation was really scaring to, I guess, all of us. Well, we never have faced such a situation before, at least not as far as I remember. And sending home patients to die at home with morphine was a scenario that really scared our society. And then it went on in other countries like that. This was when we said, okay, we have to do something. I requested cooperation and contributions from a lot of chairs at our university, from intensive care, from medical engineering, from embedded software, from automotive engineering, from the polymer engineers, and from production engineering. And we formed a team to build a pandemic ventilator. That started officially on March 26 with about 50 volunteers working on this project. We aimed for covering excess demand. We aimed initially directly for ICU level ventilation that requires appropriate user interface, all relevant sensors, first fault detection and operation, and alarming. However, we also aimed initially at looking for sensors and components from neighboring industries, as there was a complete disruption of all logistic chains. And for example, oxygen sensors, medical grade oxygen sensors, you could not buy for several months. Then you can ask, well, why not look at diving industry, for example, or other industries? The same is true for automotive, because safety critical components you also find there. We were not aiming for a CE mark due to the enormous amount of regulatory work, but for emergency approval. And we founded a not-for-profit operation company to do that and be eligible for attracting donations and contributions. As an example, this is our main board. This is a safety critical automotive device that was an Infineon Tricore, is based on an Infineon Tricore that is supported by MATLAB Simulink directly. And that is also a good software development chain. Due to Tricore facility, it allows also to build fault supervision and of operation, not just from components, but also from software. This is our first prototype, which was shown in May to our local television. And the devices, or the history and the genesis, if you want, of the device is shown here. First design in April, then in March, we had the second iteration that was actually manufactured. That's the housing manufacturing. We re-engineered PEEP valves, and also using the capacity of the Polymer Institute, the check valves. We were also designing, of course, all the components internally with mechanical engineering CAD programs. This is the third generation, and the fourth with optimization of clinical ergonomics that has to do how to place the tubing inlets and outlets appropriately for clinical operation. And the design freeze was in August, so about 6 months after start, or 5 months after start with this device concept that is now being produced with the help of also a design company contributing voluntarily to this design and also to the human interface. In October, we built the first complete prototypes, which you see here. And this shows the genesis of the graphical user interface that we use together with the embedded software group who was responsible for this part. That was the first GUI design, second GUI design, third, which, and then we went to the last design as of October. Now this simulation should show you, I hope, the pressure and flow curves, but also the pink curve in the bottom is an optional PPG sensor, which we also integrated for use in countries who do not have intensive care monitoring at hand. So this is an optional extension that we produced. Now we were in the first animal trials in early this year in February and March, and we are at the moment assembling our first or next 10 prototypes, which you see here. We have quite some media coverage that is nice attention by newspapers and also by the television again. Now this brings me to, that's our current status. That brings me now to future research directions when we think of preparing for pandemics in the future. That's not just to cover what we have at the moment, the problems that we have at the moment, but I think we should also use this, how to think about what could be a proper prevention for future situations like that. Then I think we have to not just deal with device shortage, but also deal with breakdowns of supply chains. As I mentioned, if you can't buy sensors, you cannot produce. Then you have to do supplements. But also, which is equally important, at least, is staff shortage. If we have pandemics, we have to deal with staff shortage. And I think also with shortage in infrastructure, as there is gas supply. If you build temporary hospitals in halls, in fair halls, for example, then you need to make sure that the gas supply is proper, as an example. And how to do this in countries where there is no clinical gas supply so well established. So that, I think, is really something that we should address much more in general. I think we also should empower devices much more with software. Connectivity between devices is one issue because these patients are sick. It's not just the lung. They are in a septic state. I mean, this requires also the cooperation of devices at the bedside. We also need to generate knowledge on the fly and put this into devices. And that calls for data mining, I think, and automation, which is something that I personally like because I'm a control engineer by education. And by coincidence, we just published a review paper on physiological closed loop ventilation in early 2020. That was just before the pandemic really took over, where we already discussed how to put guidelines into devices of the future. And here is one for the ArtsNet protocol that we have researched in animal trials a few years ago. Okay, last slide. We have an interaction with an African country, or actually with a foundation called Robinate, which operates ICUs in Cameroon and is building up ICUs for other countries in Africa. And we have strong interest to use our device for this charity project. And we will see how far we can develop this interaction. Cameroon, coincidentally, does not have many ICU ventilators. Okay, that is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for that presentation and that insight in the development of this ventilator, but not just in the ventilator, also on challenges and difficulties. And I would relate to your last slide where you said Cameroon needs ventilators, and could translate it into India needs ventilators. And that leads me to our second speaker today, Akash from the Biodesign Lab. And I have to say he had to jump in the last minute. But nevertheless, maybe Akash, could you give us a short insight on the project on Respire 8? That's the ventilator developed by the Biodesign Lab, and where you were standing at the beginning of the pandemic and what challenges you had to face and where you are standing with your technology right now.
Good evening, one and all. This is Akash, electronic engineer from Biodesign Innovation Lab. For this webinar, instead of me, Mr. Gautam, the CEO of Biodesign, would have attended the webinar, but due to some of his personal reasons, he couldn't attend. So, in place of him, I'm attending this. So, considering Biodesign Innovation Labs, we are a medical startup company which produces medical devices which is accessible and affordable. That's the motivation where we started this company. So we got it funded from Government of India, Government of Karnataka, IKP Eden, IKP Knowledge Park, with tremendous support from all the ecosystem partners. We were funded, and this company was started in 2017. So when this company was started, our motivation was to see where are the loopholes in like the medical technology and do some innovations to bridge the gap between high-end devices and the low-end devices, and give the medical devices in a low-cost this thing. So that was our motivation. So we visited along across hundreds of hospitals around India, and we found that there is a shortage of ventilator throughout India, not in the high facility hospitals, but in a low resource hospitals like government hospitals or like many of them. Like there is a ventilator shortage, and like for example, when we visited some hospitals in Assam, like there in the tea estates, the people over there will get snake bites, and they have to admit to the hospital, and they'll be sedated for like 6 days, 7 days together. And in that position, when there is no ventilator in a low resource setting, like the people will do that back wall mask compression, for 6 7 days to keep the patient alive. So this was one of the this thing that we found, the back wall mask, like manual ventilation that was given to the patients. So considering that, we started to work on that, and we thought it was a good idea to automate that manual ventilation. And then we started to work on this Respirate project. So this Respirate is basically a back wall mask compression, which we started to work it will give all the ventilator essential parameters like tidal volume, breath rate, H2E, P, PPIP, in a more good way. When we are doing a manual ventilation, we don't know how much amount of volume or how much amount of air we are compressing, and that problem is there. Like we don't know. This machine will give you an accurate tidal volume, how much breath rates, everything. So based on that, we started working from 2017 till 2019, 2019. Through our R&D, we started which technique we can 2019, around 2020, as all of us know, like COVID-19 started the pandemic. So we were almost in a verge of getting the device to the market, and this COVID started, and this was the problems. Like you can see, like so. Yes, as you can see, like manual bagging was is being done here. Like we don't know like how much volume is going on. So that's the reason we invented this respirate, which is a automatic ambu bag compressor. By the end of 2020, it was almost ready, and we were on a verge of doing pilot studies for that. So during the COVID-19, we had a supply chain issue. So as we are a startup, so we need more uh, like good, like more guys for helping us with support chain. So we collaborated with Remedio and another Indian company which works with iDevices. So they are also a Bangalore-based company. So we collaborated with Remedio for the supply chain, and they helped us doing the manufacturing for this uh, device. And uh, so this is the device. So this is the device. So it's basically it can be used in ambulance, ER, ICU, where is a case for like when you sedate a patient and he needs a ventilator, he or she needs a ventilator. You can use this device uh, for this thing. So this has all the features. Tidal volume, breath rate, PIP, like just like same high-end ventilators. So this was the recognition we got from Forbes. This Mr. Gautam, our CEO, and that's all. Like this is about the device.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let me ask a question. So you are in the market right now. It's approved in India, and you are distributing it, or where you are standing with your device at the moment?
Yeah, we have done all the safety related certifications. I mean, the IEC 60601, like there are medical certifications. So we have passed that modification, and we have a patent in India for this particular devices. We have also applied for multiple countries, which is on the verge of coming, like we'll get the patent. So yeah, right now we have distributed this for around 20 hospitals, like it's deployed in around 20 hospitals, and we are in speaks with government of India to do a large and mass manufacturing of this.
Okay, thanks so much. I would also want to mention that if somebody from the audience has questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. We can take them up in our discussion. Professor Leonhardt, so we had a look at the technology, and we talked about these projects ongoing all over the world for ventilators. So what are the technological challenges? And is it just about technology? What is about the staff who is dealing with these ventilators?
Yes, that's a very important question. I think it is actually a crucial question. If you give physicians, if you give the medical community devices, then there need to be people who can actually use them properly. We remember that at least if you're talking about ICU ventilation, these patients are very sick. They have lung failure, but most likely other organs affected. So it requires a very high skill set in the physicians and the nurses that actually treat the patients. And it is not of help to have complicated devices given to people who cannot use them properly. I think that has to go hand in hand, and we have to do all our best to also empower everybody to have enough staff being able to use this. As I mentioned, the other option that I think would be helpful is to also empower the devices with intelligence to make, to substitute maybe for some of the staff shortage in situations of extreme dynamics with respect to time. I mean, pandemias is not stationary. It is always extremely highly dynamic. But if you're affected, it doesn't help you, right? You don't get a bed with a, you don't get a ventilator, or even if you get a bed and a ventilator, but there's no personnel assisting you. And then I'd rather have at least some of the knowledge inside the device.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe Akash, your take on it. So when you distribute it now to the hospitals, is there a training associated for the nurses? Are you offering a kind of package, or is it just the device you're offering to the hospitals?
Yeah, initially we are giving the device along with all the circuits. Like we are like, as we have not gone for a very huge mass manufacturing, we are personally going and training nurses like how to use this device and all. So yeah, like initially with the device we are giving circuits, and we are also like trying to do a supply chain for giving all the circuits regularly for all the hospitals.
Okay, thank you. So we got our first question in. Question is from I think from Kartik Srivasana. Is there any data on the number of ventilators actually used to treat patients which were fully designed and developed in the pandemic? Maybe Akash and Professor Leonhard, maybe you have an answer to that. So not the old ventilators which were there in the hospitals. Do we have a number how many worldwide, or in Germany, India, which how many of these new developed ventilators we have?
That is very difficult to answer. At least in Germany, as far as I know, and I was also on the panel of for guidelining also our ministries on how to set up such things for pandemic release or pandemic approval. None of the initiatives that developed access or additional ventilators were actually used. We had in Germany many initiatives, but none of them got approval for emergency use finally. But that's also because in Germany, the number of approved and commercially available ventilators were not challenged, right? We so far did not reach the limits. We paid this with 3 lockdowns. That is the only way to actually break the wave such that you don't reach the limits. Of course, physicians by law are able to use, in cases of emergency, in cases of scarcity of devices, use devices that are not approved for individual curing attempts, as this is called by the law. However, I, without having a permission by the government, would not be allowed to give devices like this to a physician. I would be immediately jailed for that. So, and as this has not happened in Germany, I don't think any device that was designed and built during the pandemic ever made it to a patient in Germany. For other countries, I cannot say.
Okay, thank you. Akash, maybe you have a take. You said you started to distribute in India, and then there is another question regarding the ventilator standards and how you ensure designing the ventilator that you have a certain standard as in self-inflating bag, and how you do the quality assurance of your device.
Yes, like in India also, as Professor said, like many automotive companies and some of the other companies also like started building the ventilators during the pandemic, and there were so many companies, and yeah, as Professor told, like none of them could not make like during the certification process and all, because like building a medical device, it's not an easy task. Like we have to take care of so many things in terms of electronic safeties, uh, medical safeties, as these constraints are there. So So during that, like there were companies who have done like even I don't know like how many ventilators are there now, but with our device, as I told you, by 2020 we were almost ready with the device, like almost ready. We had some minor changes over there, so we just started to go for certification process, and yeah, we had some few challenges over there, and uh, somehow we passed it, and the certifications are clear, and we also got a patent from Government of India for this particular device.
So yeah, have a patent and the approval, and also I'm aware that you are waiting for the FDA, no, EUA approval at the moment. Good. Professor Leonard, a question to you. So there is talk about shortage on ventilators in India, and then you have this interesting project with Ghana in place. So can you give us an insight how, and you said your device is not in use in Germany as you don't have the approvals. So is it in use in Ghana, and would there be a way to bring it to India? What would be the requirements?
So in any case, no matter where we do this, either in Cameroon or somewhere else, it would require local approval. And as Akash mentioned, this is a cumbersome process in Europe. This takes a long time and also a lot of money. And we have not done this so far. While we have followed all the technical requirements, we have not done the formal approval procedures, which would cost quite some money. If you would go for a regular approval process, I would estimate this costs at least another 2 million euros. And where does that money come from? So initially, our device was for emergency in a situation where the formal requirements would be lowered due to the catastrophe situation. In Europe, in Germany, this has not happened. So if we have no catastrophe situation, then I don't expect the formal regulations to be lowered in case of standards. And if we use this on a patient anywhere in the world, we will need local approval. And we will definitely do all the technical testing anyway. That's what we're doing anyway. But the question of what kind of formal regulation procedures and also what kind of documentation you would need, that is then dependent on the local country.
But any plans to go further than Ghana?
As I said, Cameroon we will only use this on a patient if this is approved by the local authorities.
Yeah.
And without that, this will not be on a patient.
Okay. I have another question for you, Professor Leonhardt. So for me, I mean, and I'm not an engineer, it seems really fast to do. So you started last year in March when the situation was in a crisis in Germany, and then you had the first product already in place in August, if I recall it directly from your presentation. So how did you manage? How was that possible? How large was the team, and what did it take to reach there in such a fast manner?
Now, I guess anybody with industrial experience knows that building one prototype is much faster than doing serious development and stock production. That is a different story. So we had the first prototype after about 7 or 8 months, which is still fast. Yes, I agree. We had about 50 people contributing. We had various disciplines, as I said, production engineering, medical engineering, automotive engineering, software people, medical intensivists, and all of these contributing voluntarily, completely for free in their spare times. That is a situation that I guess this is a special, these needs special circumstances, like a pandemic and a synchronized feeling in the population of the university that we have to do something. And normally university is a lot of activity, but it's never synchronized like that. And to have people contributing like this over just by a phone call, that never has happened to me before. So 50 people is quite a number. That's a good development team, I think, with such a variety of expertises. Without that, we would not have been so fast, definitely. But still, getting quality levels, quality assurances for stock production is still some way to go. Animal trials are good and it worked perfect, but can you assure this for all the products? Can you assure this in after 5 years of use? That's a completely different story, right? So this is still something that we have to work on. If this goes to a patient, this has to be clarified. I have no problem with doing this. I don't see this as an obstacle that cannot be done, but it would require additional input, resources input, and most likely money input as well.
Thanks so much. Maybe a question to Akash, as you have been a bit further with your technology. So what was your challenge? I mean, my understanding, you upscaled really fast when the pandemic arrived. You said you had your product nearly ready at the end of 20, got the approval. So what were the challenges in bringing it to the patients and then upscaling?
So yeah, by start of 2020, we were ready with a prototype, not a prototype, like almost like a product only. Then during the pandemic, we started collaborating with our video, our partners. So we work like around, we were all a team of around 20, 25 people. We had the concept ready. We had all the electronics, everything ready, like based on the standards. We had maintained all the design, everything. So we are like the backdrop where we had was the quality regulatory. So we didn't have support from that. So Remedio gave us that. So so the quality regulatory, like we did tests there, like 1 or 2 times we failed, and again we came back and we did it, and then somehow we passed it, and then we did pilot studies with in Poya University. It's a medical college and hospital near Mangalore in Karnataka. So we did pilot studies for 5 patients, and the doctors there supported us, and yeah, like everything went well in the pilot studies, and then we started. We got a confidence that we can start doing the manufacturing for the product. So this process was almost around 8 to 10 months. So from March or some April we started doing this. So this till clinical pilots, this was around 8 to 10 months.
Thank you so much. So definitely the pandemic was a catalyst or was driving things forward. Professor Leonard, we have a question here. What are the challenges on the clinical side worldwide? So if one look at these products, and we tackled that a bit already. So to increase the number of intensivists, and you mentioned that, so it's not just about having the machines in place, it's about having people in place, how to take care. Is your people's ventilator designed for easy use, or do you need highly trained specialists on it?
Now, this is a simple and robust design, and it is, but it still requires that interpretation of all the numerical values and of the curves that you see. For example, adjusting PEEP, which is the expiratory pressure against which the patient exhales, and that requires profound physiological knowledge on these very sick patients. And in that sense, it is not trivial to use such a device for these very sick patients. And that, I think, is important. The device per se, if you ask, well, what will be necessary for the future, then I would definitely say we have to be oxygen supply independent in the future. So we need devices that generate their oxygen delivery wherever you are. Because this is a scarcity in many countries, is a problem in rural hospitals, because the oxygen supply is an issue, and medical grade oxygen delivery on muddy roads is not always easy. Now, But also we, I think, need more intelligence in the sense that these devices should maybe assist in adjusting, maybe assist in following guidelines, in tuning settings appropriately according to guidelines. Not everybody is aware in the stress. If you take care of 5 patients at the same time, in Germany we have a one-to-one relationship if possible, or that means 1 nurse per ICU patients. That's not available in all countries. If you have 5 patients to take care of at the same time, you may benefit from a little bit of intelligence in the ventilator by at least recommending settings.
Okay, thank you so much. I would like to take it a bit in also on the international level, and maybe the first question to you, Akash, are you looking now just in the Indian market, or you're also looking into other markets with your product, or is it something developed for, let's say, use in South Asia, in India and the neighboring countries, or would you look also into other markets?
Yeah, basically it's not only for India we built, like where and all like the underdeveloped countries, like African nations, some of them like where and all they use this bag wall mask for compressing an ambu bag like during long period of time. So we are concentrating more on those markets where we can enter there, like where there is a need for this kind of ventilation. We are planning to enter there.
So more in the global south. Okay. Professor Leonard, also a question to you with that regard. So you've been to India and working at the IIT Madras.
Yes.
So what is your interest in working with India? What has India to offer in your field? So where does lies your research interest in cooperation, especially with India?
So there is, of course, always a personal and also a professional aspect to this. Maybe I start with the personal one. I just like India, and that is, I think, why I enjoy this cooperation. IIT Madras especially has a very long tradition in interacting with Germany. As you are probably aware of, IIT Madras was also established with assistance by the Germans originally. And in that sense, of course, there is a good link. And also RWTH Aachen, my university, has a strong connection for many, many years, if not decades. Actually, one of the founding professors was the actually first dean of electrical engineering later in Aachen. So that in that sense, we have a very long history of cooperation with IIT Madras. Now, with respect to scientific cooperation, India has a lot of smart people, and a lot of very interesting cooperations come from curiosity of our Indian partners, that we also had very smooth access to clinical trials in southern India. That is also very interesting for us, because if you have specific conditions that we do not have in Europe, with respect to skin color, for example, but also with respect to infrastructure issues, then it is very interesting to look how technologies that we develop in Europe perform in these scenarios. We also have a strong interest in developing technologies in Germany for geriatrics. You mentioned this. Unfortunately, I was not aware of this, otherwise I would have joined. But I was in Aachen, one of the professors setting up the new chair of geriatrics and also attracting funding for geronto technology. Now that means technology for aging societies, and that also means technology that you can take home and people can use at their home, assisting them when they get frail, for example, or when the senses, all the senses get less strong. Now, a lot of these technologies also can be transferred to countries like India, maybe not so much because of aging, but of rural situations where you, in a very similar way, would benefit from remote operation of devices and connectivity to caregivers. In that sense, there's also a lot of interest.
Okay, thank you so much for that insight, because it's always a question. We try to tackle. I have here a question in the chat, and that I think could go to both of you. So, how did you manage to make the ventilator cost effective? What change is made in these two machines or two ventilators to reduce the overall cost of it? And maybe Akash, you go ahead, and then Professor Leonhardt, you could add on this.
So yeah, medical devices linked with cost effective is not an easy task, because you need to clear all the regulatories, like compared to other regulatories like home appliance or something. Medical regulatories are difficult to do. So in order to reduce the cost, we, instead of importing from other countries, we started to find the local manufacturers for our motors, the sensors. We started looking for more distributors or manufacturers within the country, and that was a complex procedure. It was also we started to do that, and somehow we were able to do it in an affordable way.
Yeah, Professor Leonhardt, your take on it, as it's a ventilator for 40 people.
Yes, so our ventilator is, of course, not really a commercial product in that sense, as all the engineering work has been done voluntarily on no charge. We don't have to also earn that money back. With respect to scale up for production, that is not yet completely settled, but there will definitely be an additional gain from scaling in reducing the cost. But a major part is that we're a not-for-profit organization under German conditions, with all the salary that would be involved normally and would have to be re-earned. This is a significant amount of money.
So voluntary work contributed to cost reduction in the development, and I think that's important to remark, that you're a non-for-profit organization, and that the whole development has been voluntary work by the students. I would have a question to you, Professor Leonhardt, working with the students teams in the pandemic situation. So how that went with your colleagues? You mentioned a team of 50 people. And how did the interdisciplinary work went? Well, was that necessary? So who did you onboard in the process?
Yeah, so we had computer science people, we had people from mechanical engineering, people from electrical engineering, and medical people. And a lot we had many days of 12 hours of telcos and that was really getting to the limits, I think, from what you can take over the day, especially in the early phase when things were starting and the team had to be formed. That was a lot of time we invested indeed. We of course used the modern telecommunication tools as we do now. That it is not too bad what you can do with this. Whenever we did lab experiments, we did this according to the rules set up by the university with respect to how to use lab rooms during the pandemic. If possible, only one person. If two persons in a room, then with a lot of distance in between, sharing the devices for measurement, for example. Similarly for the animal trials that we have done. So all these things have to be adapted to the actual conditions of the pandemic dynamics. But in total, I can say with a lot of time effort, it worked quite well.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think slowly we come to an end. I have a question to both of you. My final question goes to both of you, and then yeah, maybe Professor Leonhardt, you kick it off. So where do you see your people's ventilator in a year?
That depends. If we go for a formal approval process, then it will be on a patient somewhere in this world. This will require some extra resources. If not, then it will definitely become a research tool.
Okay, good. And Akash, where you do see the Respire 8 in a year?
So as of now, within India, we are getting good feedback for respirate, like using it in ambulances or operation theaters, uh, emergency care units. So yeah, right now we are getting good feedbacks from doctors as well, and we are looking for some tenders with Indian government, and possibly if we get that, we can sell in thousands, and we're looking forward for that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much to the both of you. I think that was a really interesting discussion we had, and discovering that's not just about technology. There's a lot more behind regulations, staff, intensive care unit staff. So that was, I think, really, really good, good to hear and to get a broader perspective on things. So my thanks go to the two panelists for the presentations and their time. I also want to thank the audience for the questions and for your interest in our today's event. The DWIH will have further web talks on the topic of implications of COVID-19 on the society, tackling healthcare, but we also will go further on with topics on entrepreneurship. This is also an entrepreneurship topic, of course. So there is an entrepreneurship talk taking place at the 12th of May, where we talk about entrepreneurships or startups who are working between India and Germany. And we are gonna have, and I think that's really interesting for the audience, also a web talk on AI in health at the 19th of May, which we are organizing, where we have researchers from India and Germany having a look into the developments in healthcare and in which how that is related to the AI developments. So thank you so much again for your time. Thanks again. Check out our website if you want to stay updated with our current trends. So I thank you for your participation and questions, and we hope to reconnect with you all over this year or next year on quite other interesting topics. So thanks again and have a nice evening.
Thank you very much and all the best to India.
Thank you
so much, and
Thank
all
you.
the best to everyone. Thank you.